Hello. We welcome you today. I am Pastor David Hewitt from King of Glory Lutheran Church in Carmel, Indiana. We're glad that you could join us today for our 8th edition of Boosts from the Bible. It is May 7th in the year 2020. Our spiritual devotions from the Boost from the Bible, delve into the depths of the Holy Scriptures in order to receive a boost of God's wisdom, God's love, and God's hope and peace during this strange time. Let me start with a few sentences that I read earlier today in an article. And they go like this. The nature of a pandemic is living with constant uncertainty and learning as we go. The article goes on to say there is certainly no certainty whatsoever about any of all of this at this point, and our understanding literally changes every day. The pandemic is something we cannot control, and by threatening our health, upending our economic situation, and completely throwing off our sense of normal, it has disrupted our sense of security. Now, I'm an amateur historian, and what I just read could also apply to the people of Salem, Massachusetts in the year 1692. They were not suffering a pandemic as we are, but they were having to endure a series of setbacks that added to their very dire, very dire Puritan way of thinking about life, led to the Salem witchcraft crisis. You see, the people of Salem and the rest of the Massachusetts Bay Colony had just endured a series of huge setbacks just to the north of them. You see, the local Native Americans had burnt down homes and either taken hostages or killed many of the people they knew in those new villages that were just a few miles away in southern Maine. So, in reaction, the colony put together a military expedition. And that army that they had sent had lost to the tribal armies and then ran home, leaving many soldiers they knew who were killed. Meanwhile, the economy back in the Bay Colony was in shambles for almost everyone. Most people were from farming families, and they were very angry when they, who were poor, saw the few sea merchants along the coast getting rich, while the farmers themselves were going practically hungry and starving. Something else is added to this mix. There was a sense among the Puritans of being cursed by their neighbors who seemed to them to have become witches and warlocks. Every bad thing was attributed to a neighbor that you just had an argument with. And your neighbor had just made a cutting remark, say, when you were having an argument. And usually at that argument's end, which was seen as a curse. And so after that argument, whether it was a measly thing, say after the argument your horses were uncontrollable, or your only pig died, or you couldn't get any sleep that night, or your dog bit you, or you had a couple nightmares in a row, or after the argument, something terrible happened, like your baby died, or your crop failed, or you got off all of a sudden into a big time illness in your life. Well, these things happened because you thought your neighbor had become a witch or a warlock and had cursed you. And oh, it was terrible, oh so terrible in the minds of these people. For the rest of your life, I would be cursed. When I was a student chaplain in a hospital for 9 short weeks, Even in those 9 weeks, I came across people who thought that they were cursed. Well, they may not have used the word cursed, but that's what they meant. While they were there in the hospital, in their beds, enduring cancer or heart disease or lung disease or some serious illness, they would share with me not only the disease that they were going through, but they would share with me all of their regrets in their lives that they thought together amounted to a running curse throughout their lives. Now, we have to ask ourselves, is this what the coronavirus time is all about? Being cursed? I know that the longer that all of this goes on, the more tempted we humans are to think that way. And with that feeling often comes another feeling. To give up on the one hand, or to act out on the other hand. So what does God's word say about all this? Is there anything in the Bible that can help get us straightened out so that we may avoid that being cursed feeling, that giving up and hopeless feeling? Why, of course there is. There's at least one. And so I give you today Joseph. No, not the Joseph who was the wife of Mary and who helped raise Jesus. The first Joseph. The one in Genesis. The one who was featured in the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. The Joseph who was almost the youngest boy in a clan of 12 boys, all sons of the godly patriarch Jacob, who himself was the grandson of Abraham. This is the great family that became, over many generations, the nation of Israel. They were the birth clan of the followers of Yahweh, our God. Joseph was the father's favorite, receiving from his father that famous, beautiful coat. Joseph dreamed dreams and shared them with his jealous brothers. Dreams that one day they all the elder brothers would bow down to young Joseph. So one day the brothers thought of killing him, but instead stuck him in a deep well. And when slave traders came by, they sold Joseph to the slave traders, who in turn took Joseph to Egypt, selling Joseph to the captain of the Pharaoh's guard, a man named Potiphar. Now let me jump ahead in the story to the time that parallels our time the most. In this part of the story, we find Joseph in prison. And we find that he has been in prison for many, many years. What can Joseph look back on to give him hope in this situation? Why should Joseph believe in his God at this point? Why not rather might he feel that he has been cursed for all time? Let's review these years in the life of Joseph. First, he was almost killed by his brothers, but instead thrown into a well for a while and then sold to slave traders, who in turn sold him to Potiphar, the Egyptian official. And next, Joseph became a well-respected slave in Potiphar's household. Things were looking up. But then immediately, Potiphar's wife tried to lure Joseph into an extramarital affair. And Joseph refused, saying that it was wrong, that it was wrong to injure Potiphar in this way. He told the wife, "How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" For his fidelity to God, Joseph was accused of rape and thrown into prison. Then Joseph inspired a fellow prisoner, the former cupbearer to the Pharaoh. Helped that cupbearer to have hope of being reinstated to his former position. You see, this cupbearer had just had a dream, And Joseph interpreted that dream to mean that the cupbearer would be welcomed back into Pharaoh's household. And that did indeed happen, as Joseph prophesied. Joseph had made the cupbearer promise this: "Please remember me when it is well with you again. Please do me the kindness to make mention of me to the Pharaoh, and so to get me out of this place." For in fact, Joseph went on, "I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should have me put in this dungeon." What happened next, after the cupbearer was restored to his post? We read, "Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him." That must have been the toughest time for Joseph, just as we are going through a tough time. As the time drags on for us, so the time must really have dragged on at that point for Joseph. Just as he thought he was getting out of this mess, nothing happens. Nothing. But did Joseph give up? It is likely that he did not give up. Even though the cupbearer did not mention him to Pharaoh for 2 long years, Joseph did not feel cursed. Rather, Joseph was ready, really ready, when his time for redemption arrived. You see, after 2 long years, Pharaoh had an important dream, a dream which no one could interpret in his court. It was then that the cupbearer remembered and recommended Joseph to the Pharaoh to interpret his dream. This interpretation that Joseph made so struck Pharaoh and his court that they not only lifted Joseph up out of prison, but made him second in command of the entire Egyptian kingdom. Amazing. Joseph's interpretation of Pharaoh's dream allowed Egypt to save a lot of grain during the upcoming 7 successful years of farming, that they may be well prepared for the following 7 quite unsuccessful years of farming. The result, that Joseph saved not just Egypt, but the whole region from starving, including saving his father and his brothers and their families from starvation. Now, these brothers, when they came to Egypt to get some grain and survive, at first they did not recognize their brother Joseph. And later, when Joseph did reveal himself to them, they became very afraid that he would seek revenge against them. Now, here's the thing. We can feel cursed and lose hope. But God does not want us to lose hope. God has a deep plan going on here, just as God had a deep plan with Joseph. So let us keep faith in God in the same way that Joseph kept faith with God. As Joseph told his fearful brothers, referring to how they sold him into slavery and caused his many years of difficult travail, "Do not be afraid," he told them. "Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as God is doing today. So, brothers, have no fear." No matter what you and I are going through, God's intentions are likewise good. And if you will note from the way Joseph puts it, God's intentions for good often become more and more clear over time. Even when Joseph was alone, even when he was alone like we are, and in jail, God was planning ways in which Joseph would not only be freed from prison, from his isolation, but also God was planning ways in which Joseph's godly talents would be used not only to save the people, his people of Israel, who generations later would give us Jesus, but also Joseph's talents would be used to save thousands and thousands of people from a terrible and lengthy drought, in the process saving other non-Hebrew people who were also made by God in God's image and likeness. And even now, God is working through people the world over to do the same thing, to save the same people God has made. Of that, let's be thankful. And let us be hopeful and not living with cursed dread, hopeful for the future. Even if, like Joseph in his dungeon, you and I have to wait longer than we would like. A length of time that sometimes we might be worried whether we can get through or not. Ask God for more of God's patience, more of God's endless supply of patience. And God will, as with Joseph, deliver. Amen. Well, thank you for your attention. You're invited to join us for another edition of Boosts from the Bible next week. May God continue to be with you.